Mm-hmm.
And I've talked with some of the biggest office designers in the world. I've talked with companies that supply office furniture. And I've visited a lot of offices that have physically remade themselves to look like more of a place where you might want to spend time. One of the funniest ones I visited was actually a cereal making company. This is a kind of fuzzy, very Instagram friendly cereal company. And they decided to make their office look like a cereal box.
Why not?
Why not? And
What does it look like when your office resembles a cereal box?
I mean, there was a little bit of me that was like, I could live here. And they told me their motto is to be a Fruit Loop in a world of Cheerios. And so they're trying to bring that into every piece of furniture in the office. There are bright pink couches and planters everywhere. They really leaned into the fake plants. They sourced a lot of their furniture vintage. It's color everywhere. It's a little bit psychedelic feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I also visited, an office that really feels like stepping into like a Soho club, like it's very hotel lobby. There was really chic curated collections of books. There's like little nooks where you have armchairs, lots of upholstery, faux grates, Keith Haring coffee table books. It really feels like you are stepping in somewhere special. So it looks very glamorous. I think the actual experience of working there is not the easiest. It's not always the most conducive to working.
Right.
What a lot of workers tell me is that, a game night or a bar cart can be fun here and there, but there's also a cringiness to some of these efforts. There's also the challenge of it makes getting your job done at the office a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the fact that when you look at the numbers, they haven't really budged. So HR managers are kind of throwing the kitchen sink at this problem of getting people back in the office, but is it really doing all that much?
There's numerical evidence, you're saying, that ultimately this isn't really moving the needle all that much.
Right. From the numbers on how full offices actually are, things have really plateaued.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, there are companies that are actually doing sticks, not carrots.
And what do those sticks look like?
I mean, for some companies that looks like basically turning back the clock to pre-pandemic and saying, we will see you at your desk 5 days a week, 9 to 5 or 9 to 9.
Give us some examples of that. I'm really curious what that looks like and what the response from workers is.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to an AI company outside San Francisco, for example, where the CEO is adamant that people have to be in 5 days a week. What he said to me is that, none of the greatest inventions in history were made on Zoom. It's possible that, we just haven't seen the greatest Zoom invention yet. But his thought is that they are doing very difficult, very fast-moving work in artificial intelligence. It is a highly compensated job, and it's an exciting place to work because you're surrounded by really smart people.
Right.
And so he will not make any exceptions to the idea that he wants to see everyone in the office 5 days a week. He tells me he has the fullest parking lot in the Bay Area.
I'm curious if this stick approach ever backfires.
It definitely does. Some companies have taken a much harder line approach to return to office, and they've lost people over it. Grindr, the gay dating app, is a good example of that. They decided this summer that they wanted people back in the office at least a couple of days a week, but they wanted people back in the same offices as their teams and managers.
Mm-hmm.
And Grindr had grown during the pandemic. They'd hired people who had come on with the understanding that they would just be working from home for as long as they wanted.
From wherever they were.
Exactly. And then the company said they were going to have to relocate cities to report to the same offices as their teams. And Grindr did lose some people over that policy. There were people who just left the company because they decided they did not want to move cities to, report to the office a couple days a week. On the other hand, the management was really firm that they think that the company is going to do much better and the work is going to be stronger if people are near their teams physically and if they can interact with their managers, getting that feedback, building those relationships.
Emma, as you've been talking here, it's occurred to me that the absolutists in the return to office debate that we now know is over, they might have had a point. And let me just explain. Their point was basically that workers should either all be in the office 5 days a week, or they should be allowed to work from home whenever they want. And that way, there's not this hybrid split brain problem of uncertainty, anxiety, forced fun. The workers who are in the office all the time, they get the benefit of the connection, predictability, clear sense of professional development, and the corporate ladder, where they're headed. And those who work from home all the time get the clear benefits of being truly remote. They don't have to commute. They don't end up going to the office like you do in a booth on a Zoom call. And instead of either of those, what we have is this kind of muddled compromise that is now a kind of permanent reality.
Well, I think a lot of people are hopeful that we can get to a place where hybrid is the best of both worlds. I think, people were given a level of flexibility during remote work that is just hard to take back from them. I think, what a lot of researchers I've spoken to have said is that when they look at studies on the effects of remote work on productivity, they're kind of all over the map. And the reason is that it basically comes down to how well managed those hybrid work plans are. When they're done well, it makes people more productive. When they're done badly, it makes people less productive. And so I think, we've suddenly arrived at the end of the return to office battles, and now everyone's trying to figure out how do we make this reality actually work for people.
Right.
And it's not just about, some coder wearing headphones on a beanbag in San Francisco. It's about people across so many industries, across so many parts of the country. Like, this is a phenomenon, again, touching tens of millions of people. And people are really trying to figure out how do we make this work in a way that doesn't feel cringy and, counterproductive.
Right. And it feels reasonable to remember that it took decades and generations to build up the previous system, and then very little time to essentially break it down and arrive at this new hybrid model, and therefore stands to reason that it's going to take years and years, maybe decades, to come up with a true replacement, a set of structures, rituals, and rhythms around hybrid work that are going to make it better, more sustainable, less cringy.
Exactly. I mean, I think the workplace has seen huge changes before. We've seen the entrance of women into the workplace. We've seen personal computers, which meant you could do your work wherever, whenever. But I can't think of another time when the workplace has changed fundamentally overnight.
Right.
We woke up one morning and suddenly had to work in an entirely different way, in a different place, just remake our routines. And so I think it stands to reason that it's going to take more than a couple of years to really figure out how to make that actually work for people. And hybrid work also is a new chapter. We sort of got used to remote work. We got used to logging into Zoom and slacking with people and sending them emojis as a way to bond. But we haven't really totally gotten to a comfortable place with hybrid yet. We're still figuring out, is it the bar card? Is it the game night? Is it the sticks? Like, what's going to make this actually effective so that people don't commute and then lock themselves in a, hermetically sealed room?
Right. I mean, you have... Which is, what is it going to take to get you, Emma, out of that booth? Have you thought about that?
Well, I'm here with you right now, having a great time.
You have left your booth for us.
I've left my booth for you guys, and sometimes my coworkers bring in really good snacks.
That's what gets you out.
That draws me out. But I also think, everyone's kind of finding their own comfortable resting place. The booth is working for me. I would recommend it. You can pop in and out. You can still have lunch with your coworkers. You can bump into your manager. I think everyone's finding that sort of resting place that works for them.
Right. One day at a time, we're filling it out. Well, Emma, thank you very much for the chat.
Thanks for having me on in person.
We'll be right back. Here's what else you need to Notre Dame. On Wednesday, pressure intensified on former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley to drop out of the Republican presidential race and coalesce around Donald Trump, with the Republican Party's chairwoman, Ronna McDaniel, telling Fox News that Haley has no shot at winning.
I think she's run a great campaign, but I do think there is a message that's coming out from the voters, which is very clear. We need to unite around our eventual nominee, which is going to be Donald Trump.
Haley has vowed to stay in the race, and one of her biggest supporters, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, forcefully rejected McDaniel's call for Haley to end her campaign.
with all due respect to Ronna McDaniel, to say that we're just going to call it after 2 states, 40 states to go, the head of the Republican Party saying we don't want to hear from all the other Republicans in the nation, that's nonsense. You gotta let the voters decide, not a bunch of political elites out of D.C.
Today's episode was produced by Sydney Harper, Lou Reed, and Mooj Sadie. It was edited by Patricia Willens and engineered by Alyssa Moxley. Contains original music by Alicia Baitu, Dan Powell, and Diane Wong. Our theme music is by Jim Brunberg and Ben Landsberg of Wonderly. That's it for the Daily. I'm Michael Barbara. See you tomorrow.
Sergeant and Mrs. Smith, you are going to love this house.
Is that a tub in the kitchen? There's no field manual for finding the right home, but when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
There are more than 3 billion video gamers worldwide.
We have seen people playing games for 10 years and 20 years because of the community who you meet in games.
Today, the head of one major video game developer on using AI to advance gaming responsibly.
Everyone, including the consumers and the users of this technology, should be cognizant that it's very likely there will be some sort of bias.
Real community in artificial intelligence in gaming. I'm Nyla Boodoo, and from Axios, this is One Big Thing. AI-driven technologies are already changing gaming.
Gaming is one of the industries where AI is really proving its value fast. The industry is actually bigger than Hollywood now, and gamers expect a lot from game developers.
That's Ryan Heath, Global Technology Correspondent for Axios. I asked him to set the stage for our interview this week.
Games themselves are getting so sophisticated these days that AI definitely has the potential to change the economics of the whole industry by automating creation. You're still going to need humans. This isn't a job loss story. It's much more likely that AI will speed up creation and expand the sorts of characters and imagery that get used in games. That said, 84% of game developers surveyed by the Game Developers Conference say they have ethical worries about how generative AI is getting used.
One of these is Sung-Yi Yu, President and Chief Strategic Officer at South Korean-based video game developer NCSoft. Her company is behind online games like Lineage, City of Heroes, and Guild Wars. And she's been talking about responsible AI since way before it was buzzy.
All this technology and the software that we develop really reflects the perspective of those who are developing this.
I wanted to know more about how Sung-Yi sees the power of gaming today and where AI is a strength and a potential weakness. So I sat down with her last week at the Axios house we set up at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Welcome to One Big Thing, Sung-Yi.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So I wanted to start with NCSoft. You talk about the communities that games create. What data do we have on how these games actually bring people together?
NCSoft started in 1995 and was one of the first gaming companies that developed and published MMORPG games, which stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Games. And by nature, the community aspect of it is integral part of the gameplay. And before the social media was so prevalent across the world, we have seen people meet through the games, be the best friends, or get married, and we through like numerous in-game weddings for them since early 2000s.
So you've had in-game weddings for people. I think I heard you say that you can think of the world as divided between people who play games and people who don't play games. For people who don't play games, Can you explain, I know that you've analyzed terabytes of data on multiple player games, like what do you think it is that brings people back to particular games time and time again?
So first of all, play is always a very integral part of all of us humans, right? So we learn how to do things. If you kind of see the baby polar bears, that you can see sibling bears playing together to learn how to hunt and how to interact with other bears and how to use their different body parts, etc. And I think that's the play is very integral for like learning. And not only that, I think it's very important for like fostering creativity and sharpening your sensory skills. And there is a notion called Homo ludens as opposed to Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens is people who think, Homo ludens is people who play. It kind of emphasizes how play is such an integral part of the human development and evolution. And for the game developers, we're trying to give players different experience. In one sense, it's a very safe environment. It's like risk-free because if you fail, if something doesn't work out, you have unlimited lives to try together and opportunities. So this is a safe environment. And some people come into gaming for a community to meet other friends. Some people come into gaming for the joy of problem solving, or some people come into gaming for like exploration, and they like to explore the world, the virtual world, and find new things and enjoy the serendipity. So that's how we kind of think of games and why people come to game over and over again.
So it must be a very difficult decision for you then when you decide to shut down games. I imagine that can become a very upsetting or controversial decision as someone who runs these gaming communities.
Yes, it's one of the most difficult decisions. I mean, I think we try. Its game development process is very long, as you know. I mean, it takes some of the big games that we launched 4 years, 5 years, and along the way, we go through a lot of the focus group test, closed beta, to make sure that what we're developing has resonate very well with our target audience. But I think our preference is to stop development of the game if we kind of can foresee that it's not going to perform very well in the marketplace. But some games, inevitably we launch it, but it doesn't work as much as we expected in the market after the launch, then we have to make very difficult business decisions to shut it down. We try to give enough lead time to the community so that they can be mentally prepared for that and give them opportunity to enjoy the last months with others that they kind of met within the game community, etc.
So I am not a gamer. I have a lot of family members who are, and I did become a super fan of the television adaptation of The Last of Us because I loved the story so much. And the same thing when I watched the TV show, the TV adaptation of Halo. And I was just drawn into the incredibly compelling narratives around these worlds. And I wonder if you think we're at a point in our culture where the worlds and the stories of these games are just like books or plays that can be adapted into other art forms.
Absolutely, you're right. Sometimes I say like, oh, gaming is a new language for this young generation. They understand, and it's almost like fascinating to watch these young people get on the game and like instantly knows what to do and how to navigate. Almost it's like their second nature. And gaming is a great platform to tell a story. The story that you experience as a hero is different from individuals because the speed of progression is different. The how you play, how you wander around the world is different. And so there are infinite stories, and it's no wonder there are like so many compelling stories that can come out of it.
How did you first get involved? Like, what was the first game that you played?
I mean, just like anyone else. I mean, I think when I first had access to a personal computer when I was 8 years old, and I still remember at the time it was before Windows. Out.
So was this like the Atari era? This is pre-Windows
era.
DOS era.
Okay. So I had to have like a 3.5-inch DOS floppy disk.
I remember those.
I started a computer, and I play snake games, and I play some cassette games, and I loved playing.
This message comes from NPR sponsor FX presenting Feud, Capote versus the Swans. From creator Ryan Murphy, this drama stars Naomi Watts, Demi Moore, and Diane Lane. FX's Feud premieres January 31st on FX. Stream on Hulu.
Around 200 BC, China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, feared death so badly that he sent an alchemist on voyages across the sea to search for a magic elixir that would give him immortality. After the alchemist disappeared at sea, the legend says the emperor took things into his own hands and died after drinking what he thought was a cure. Around 200 years later, another legend was born. A holy grail that was thought to hold life-restoring powers for anyone who drank from it. There was the Philosopher's Stone, the Fountain of Youth, and then, in late December of 1899, a scientist named Eli Mechnikov woke up in Paris to learn that he had done it. He had found the secret to eternal life.
The French morning newspaper Le Matin carried a huge headline in large block letters all across the front page, and it said, "Vive la vie, long live life."
Underneath that headline, it said things like
L'élixir de l'éternelle jeunesse,
the elixir of eternal youth,
l'Institut des miracles,
the Institute of Miracles,
la vieillesse vaincue.
old age defeated.
None of us should despair to see the year 2000. We'll reach the age of the patriarchs, and Monsieur Mechnikov will be damned only by heirs of fortunes.
Eli Mechnikov had captured the world's attention. For millennia, people had tried to evade death, seeking cures in things like mercury, gold, powders, liquids. But now, they had a new tool, science. And it was miraculous. There were new vaccines, X-rays had just been invented. You could now see what had once been invisible. And Mechnikov had helped to make that happen.
He was very famous. He was one of the most famous scientists in the world.
Eli Mechnikov was hardcore. The man drank cholera in the name of science. He injected himself with disease, and he tested the body's power and its limits. Later in his career, his work on the immune system would win him a Nobel Prize. When the world was sick, Eli Mechnikov tried to cure it, and he made sure people knew.
He loved the journalists. He never turned them away, and they loved him even more than he loved them. And they followed him around, and they took down his every word.
And his message was clear.
He thought that the solution to everything was science. So of course, science was going to solve aging as well.
Aging is a disease that should be treated like any other.
No one had studied aging scientifically before, and here was this famous scientist saying he wanted to take it on. But Mechnikov didn't just want to study aging, he wanted to cure it.
This became for him like his new mission.
Science alone can lead suffering humanity into the right path.
To free the world from this terrible affliction.
And the world ate it up.
Entire sacks of letters that piled up in the mailroom was stuffed with letters from people who didn't want to die.
Nobody likes to die. Nobody likes to see their friends and family die. So we want to extend the lifespan as much as possible.
People nowadays want to remain ageless.
We can delay aging.
It's one of the foundational questions in science.
We can stop aging.
How long can we live?
We keep searching.
What is it exactly we're looking for?
I don't know what I want to do.
Living to 200, or are we looking to living to, 95 with our senses and being active and in control?
I think the most important thing to me is maintaining my mobility.
I would love to rent a house.
I think I want to travel more.
Traveling as much as I can.
More time to myself.
We all know that winter is coming for us.
We have about 20, 25 years left.
The question is when, and can we push it out as much as possible? People have been talking about it for thousands of years. It's not a new question, it's an old question.
Since the beginning of human civilization, people have been obsessed with staying young, even living forever. Today, that obsession is tied up with media, medicine, and money.
So I got this drone on Amazon, and it literally is the best.
We spend billions of dollars on anti-aging products.
It doesn't cause wrinkles. You can easily drink out from the top of it.
We're told to look younger.
The top 10 celebrities who have aged badly.
We question whether older people are fit to lead.
Poll after poll has shown that many voters are worried about the age of the two likely nominees.
But what if these are the wrong questions? Is aging something we even need to cure? And what does it mean if we can't? I'm Ramtin Arablu.
I'm Randa Fattah.
On this episode of Through Life, we're not going to answer the question of aging, but we are going to tell you the story of someone who tried. Coming up, our producer Devin Katayama tells the story of Eli Meshnikov.
Hello, my name is Sabush Chakraborty. I'm calling from Austin, Texas, and you are listening to True Line NPR.
This message comes from NPR sponsor, the Capital One Venture X card. Earn unlimited 2x miles on everything you buy. Plus, get access to a $300 annual credit for bookings through Capital One Travel. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. Support for NPR and the following message come from TIAA. Wyclef Jean and TIAA are on a mission to give back. More than half of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So the new single, Paper Right, is on a mission to start closing the gap. With TIAA, streams turn into donations to a nonprofit called First Generation Investors that teaches students how to invest. Stream now and help them stack for a great cause.
Discover a social media empire on a mission to reconstruct America using guns and Facebook. Welcome to No Compromise, podcast winner of the 2021 Pulitzer Prize for audio reporting. Go behind the hot button issues in the national debate and listen to the No Compromise podcast from NPR.
Part 1. This Love of Life.
The country is neither beautiful nor rich. Steppes, hillocks covered with low grasses and wild wormwood. A poor village, meager vegetation, no river. The whole impression is a melancholy one.
In the middle of the 19th century, Ilya Ivanovich and his wife and children left St. Petersburg, Russia for the countryside.
But what boundless space, what soft, silver-gray coloring, and in the mornings and evenings, what fresh, cool air.
It was here, on a little slice of land outside the main village, that they would welcome their 5th child into the world.
Though they wished to have no more children. One more child was born on the 16th May, 1845, Eli Meshnikov.
These descriptions of Eli Meshnikov's early life are from the biography his wife, Olga, wrote about him.
Fair and slender, with silky hair and a diaphanous pink and white complexion, he had small gray-blue eyes, full of kindliness and sparkle.
He had a few brothers and sisters, and out of all of them, he was probably the most curious.
He was so restless that he went by the name Quicksilver. He always wished to see everything, to know everything, and found his way everywhere.
As a kid, he was always chasing bugs and, looking at what bugs do.
He could only be kept quiet when his curiosity was awakened by the observation of some natural object, such as an insect or a butterfly.
Then he would invite all of his siblings and cousins for a lecture in natural history, and he would actually pay them out of his pocket money to come and listen to his lectures.
This is Lena Zeldovich. She's currently a science and medical journalist in New York City, but she grew up in the former Soviet Union, where Eli Metchnikov was a household name.
So I learned that name at a very young age.
She remembers hearing about his famous discoveries, the same way you might have learned about Albert Einstein's E=mc².
He was like a cherished name, a big name. A couple of research institutions were named after him. We definitely knew about him growing up.
Metchnikov was born in a time and place when medicine was only just starting to modernize. The human body wasn't really understood, and diseases like cholera and typhoid were really scary. Many doctors still believed in bloodletting and would actually treat patients with toxic substances like mercury and lead. So medical care itself was basically synonymous with suffering.
From a very young age, I think he had this desire to alleviate human suffering, and that's how he sort of found his way into biological research.
So Metchnikov grows up to become a zoologist, and he couldn't have picked a better time because when he was just 14 years old, a new theory rocked the scientific world. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution.
The main goal at the time of many scientists and of him as well was to test Darwin's idea that all life on Earth came from the same common ancestor.
And he dedicated his early career to researching that theory.
When he was in his late 30s, he traveled to Italy, to the island of Sicily, to study marine animals, and he was studying the larva of starfish.
This is Luba Bukhansky. She's a science writer at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel.
And I've written a book called Immunity, How Eli Metchnikov Changed the Course of Modern Medicine.
This trip to Sicily would change everything for Metchnikov. He and his wife were staying by the seaside in a cottage overlooking the bright blue Messina Strait. The strait was home to all sorts of marine creatures. And while his wife went out to explore Sicily, Metchnikov would spend long days holed up in the cottage, staring at jars filled with seawater and tiny organisms. One day, he had his eye pressed up against his microscope, peering inside these minuscule starfish larvae.
And in the larva, he saw mobile cells.
These were cells that wandered inside the larva, gobbling up food and other particles. Metchnikov had seen these cells in action before, but that day, watching them go about their business, it struck him.
He came up with the idea that maybe this is a defensive force of the organism.
Sensing that my hunch concealed something particularly interesting, I became so excited that I began striding up and down the room.
He performed an experiment. It's a very famous experiment in immunology where he inserted thorns into these larvae.
If the cells attacked the thorn as a foreign invader, his theory would be correct.
And he saw that the cells indeed ganged up on the thorns. This was for him evidence of his theory that they were there to protect the larva.
Watching this unfold through his microscope, his mind was blown.
In fact, this was the first material evidence of inner healing forces in science.
The invisible had become visible. Metchnikov wasn't the first person to observe this healing force, but he was the first person to define it as an immune response. This was the work that would later earn him a Nobel Prize.
The idea that the body has inner powers that can be studied and enhanced and understood, I mean, that's enormous. It just turned everything around.
Around the turn of the century, while Mechnikov was consumed by his work on immunity, another question started to nag him.
He was living in Paris, working at the Pasteur Institute.
The Pasteur Institute was home to the miracle makers of the day, scientists who were researching vaccination, figuring out what caused plague.
He was in his mid-50s. He started having kidney trouble, and he began to worry about his own aging. And he also began to fear death.
Our strong will to live runs counter to the infirmities of old age and the shortness of life. That's the greatest disharmony of human nature.
Life expectancy at the time was around the mid-40s, so he must have had a growing sense of his own mortality. But he wasn't just concerned about himself. In his mind, aging was one of the greatest problems facing humankind. The fact that we all grow older, and that aging and sickness until death.
And he was appalled to discover how little was known about aging and that there was no systematic study of aging. There were textbooks about diseases of old age, but not about old age itself.
And Mechnikov comes up with this theory, an idea that would stay with him throughout his entire life.
His hope was that if people live long enough, they will develop this death instinct.
The death instinct.
This instinct must be accompanied by marvelous sensations, better than any other we are capable of experiencing.
Death instinct would mean that people would be happy to die after living a long and healthy lives.
Perhaps the anxious search for the purpose of human life is nothing but a vague yearning for this anticipation of natural death.
And he went around looking for this death instinct.
He became so obsessed with figuring out how older people felt as they approached death that he would literally chase the elderly down.
Centenarians made it into the newspapers. So whenever he would see an article about an old person, he rushed to meet them and he wanted to ask them, about if they wanted to die.
So this is late 19th century. We're going through a transformation from the agrarian economic system to the industrial economic system.
This is Carol Haber. She's a professor and Dean Emerita of Tulane University in the School of Liberal Arts.
I was trained as a medical and social historian, and I focused largely on the history of aging.
Carol says she doesn't think there was ever a time when old age was seen as something wonderful that everyone respected. But around the time Mechnikov turned his attention to aging, there was a cultural shift happening in how people viewed it.
If you look at the late 19th century, the image of the old person is hunched over with a cane, sitting in a rocking chair. It's pretty negative.
At that time, the Industrial Revolution was changing how families lived and worked. And in this work revolution, the elderly were getting left behind.
You had the feeling that there wasn't this basis of support, and that old people were going to end up in what they call the industrial scrap heap. They couldn't keep up, they couldn't learn new skills, and so they were going to become obsolescent.
Western society's view, whether it was true or not, was that the elderly weren't compatible with the increasingly fast-paced world. Caring for the elderly came to be seen as a burden. Many elderly people ended up living the rest of their days in a hospital. And that's exactly where Mechnikov went to find them.
He went to this large French hospital, La Salpêtrière.
La Salpêtrière was an infamous hospital in Paris. It had long doubled as a psychiatric ward and a home for the elderly.
And most of them were poor because, obviously more wealthy elderly wouldn't make it there.
For a lot of Parisians, it was a dark, distant presence looming over the city. Inside its imposing brick walls was a massive, sprawling complex that for centuries had been a place of squalor and suffering. A famous French neurologist referred to it as Le Versailles de la douleur, the Versailles of pain.
Probably must have been quite a sad place, where all these people were brought to die and there was not much that could really be done for them.
But it was the perfect laboratory for Mechnikov.
He went around asking them what they wanted, and he was hoping to find the death instinct. And he was really disappointed because even the sick, old people, they didn't want to die, they wanted to get better.
I discovered that one and all felt as if they were continually being threatened by death, as if they were convicts awaiting the day of execution. At the Salpêtrière, the great ambition of women of 80 is to live to 100, and the desire to live is almost universal.
Even in a miserable place like Salpêtrière, people wanted to live longer.
What is this love of life that makes death so terrible?
He developed a whole philosophy that there was this big disharmony in the world, in nature, between the shortness of human life and people's desire to live.
Mechnikov came to believe that aging was a disease, and he was sure that science could cure it. He envisioned a utopic future where medicine could prolong life up to 150 years. At that age, he thought, the death instinct would finally appear. So, he went all in.
This became for him like his new mission to free the world from this, this terrible affliction.
Coming up, Mechnikov heads back to the lab with a new mission, to extend human life to 150 years.
Hello, this is Nancy Smith, and I'm in Kiel, Germany. You're listening to Throughline from NPR. It's a great show. I love it. Keep up the good work.
We just want to take a moment to shout out our Throughline Plus subscribers. Thank you so much for your support. If you don't already know, subscribing to Throughline Plus means you get to listen to our show without any sponsor breaks. And you also get access to special bonus episodes where we take you behind the scenes, introduce you to our amazing producers, and tell you about how we make the show. To get these awesome benefits and support our work here at NPR, head over to plus.npr.org/throughline.
Here at Planet Money, we bring complex economic ideas down to earth. We find weird, fun, interesting stories that explain the way money shapes our lives. Inflation, recessions, the price of gas, we've got you. Listen now to the Planet Money podcast from NPR.
Want all of NPR without relying on your radio? Visit npr.org to be connected to your local station wherever you are and wherever the news takes you. Get your vital mix of rigorously reported local and national stories, all live, free, and at your fingertips at npr.org.
From an Iraq war cover-up to towns ravaged by opioids, to the roots of our modern immigration crisis, Embedded explores what's been sealed off and undisclosed. NPR's original investigative podcast reveals why these stories and the people behind them matter. Listen to the Embedded podcast, only from NPR.
Part 2. Trusting his gut.
In his 20s, Eli Mechnikov had been visited by death.
His first wife died of tuberculosis. It's a disease that kills you slowly. You can basically watch your loved one wither away. Day after day, month after month. Yeah, they travel to places with better climate, milder winters, sunnier places, and nothing helped, and she eventually died.
This sent Mechnikov into a deep depression. And then, a decade later, he went through it again.
His second wife contracted typhoid fever, and it looked like, she could die, and so he inoculated himself with some kind of a tick-borne disease, thinking that they will die together. But neither one of them died.
And this changed everything for Mechnikov.
After his recovery, he had a renaissance of vital intensity. The life instinct developed in him in a high degree. His health became flourishing, his energy and power for work greater than ever, and the pessimism of his youth began to pale before the optimistic dawn of his maturity.
Fast forward a couple of decades. It's the early 1900s. The now famous Mechnikov set out to pioneer the study of aging and cure it. He wants people to be able to live happy and healthy until they're ready to die.
The purpose of human existence lies in going through a normal cycle of life, leading to a loss of the life instinct and a painless old age, bringing about a reconciliation with death.
By now, he's a superstar at the Pasteur Institute, which was one of the most prestigious science facilities in the world at the time. It's sort of a scientist's dream. He has lab assistants, facilities, all the resources he can imagine at his fingertips, and he gets to work.
His lab gradually filled up with old animals of all sorts.
There are mice and rats and geese and cats and dogs. There's this 87-year-old turtle and a 70-year-old parrot.
Mechnikov was very happy that he was still interested in females.
And that's just the beginning. He starts pulling out hair from an old Great Dane, from a coworker, and then from his own head to figure out why it's turning gray. And remember, he's a renowned immunologist with kind of a savior complex, so he's also spreading the gospel to everyone he knows.
When he rode on public transportation, he would tell people how they should be careful about microbes. He boiled everything he ate. Even strawberries and even peeled bananas. He thought that the skin probably didn't protect them well enough. And when he invited guests to restaurants, he asked them to bring a burner, and he sterilized the utensils.
Okay, so maybe he's not like the most fun guy to have around, but this is the beginning of the science of aging, of gerontology, which, by the way, was a term that Mechnikov coined in 1903. And science is all about making mistakes, so you can find that one thing that works. And as he's conducting all these experiments, he zeroes in on this one idea, that the body was being poisoned.
He thought that the root of aging, that it all started in the intestines.
Specifically, the large intestine.
The large intestine must be regarded as one of the organs possessed by man and yet harmful to his health and his life. The presence of large intestine in the human body is the cause of a series of misfortunes.
The idea that something bad was happening in the intestines is one that dates back thousands of years, so this wasn't necessarily a new idea. But in the late 19th century, it was making a comeback because science was making new links to germs and disease.
At the time, the human intestine was viewed as a cesspool of all sorts of toxins. I guess the proof that all the scientists had was, hey, just look what comes out of your rear end. Any more questions?
So Mechnikov thought that in the intestines there are microbes that cause rotting, and that the rotting is what really causes the deterioration of aging. The big question became, how to fight that.
Then one day, he has a breakthrough.
He learned that in Bulgaria there is this entire population of centenarians in the mountains.
Remember, Mechnikov is obsessed with centenarians, and there were newspaper articles backing up this idea that people in this region of Bulgaria were living a long time. And so he had to know why.
Yogurt.
Yogurt.
They ate lots of yogurt.
Mechnikov had to tell everyone. It's 1904, Paris, a crowded lecture hall at the Society of French Agriculturists. The famous Eli Mechnikov is the guest speaker.
The lecture was called Old Age.
And he starts by getting up there and rattling off some pretty dark ideas.
He was saying how in Europe, old people are miserable.
Their lives often become very difficult, unable to fulfill any useful role in the family or in the community. Old people are considered a very heavy burden.
He claimed they were more likely to commit suicide or be murdered.
One is shocked by the quantity of murders committed against the elderly, notably against elderly women.
He also repeated, without evidence by the way, that some cultures killed and ate their women.
Because they're useless. And he said that people there say that old dogs can at least capture seals and old women can't even do that. He was painting a very sort of gruesome picture of old age.
Mechnikov is straddling the line between serious science and being a salesman, because he's still trying to sell the world on science. So he's playing to his audience, stoking the fears of aging that are growing at the time, and then saying, hey, don't worry, science has a solution.
He brought an old dog and a parrot. The dog was 17 and he looked very old and decrepit. And the parrot, who was 70, looked much younger than the dog.
And then Mechnikov lays down his science.
Birds do not have such large intestines as mammals. They don't store as many microbes.
And he says if we can find a way to prolong that decay in our intestines, then maybe we can prolong it in the rest of our bodies.
And then he says maybe there's a solution because, in Bulgaria people live at home.
It is interesting to point out that this microbe is found in sour milk consumed in large quantities by Bulgarians, in a region renowned for the longevity of its inhabitants.
He connected all these dots together. We age because in the intestines there is rotting, and lactic acid that is produced in sour milk can stop this rotting by killing the bacteria that cause the rotting. And there you have proof. All over the world, newspapers started running stories.
The Chicago Daily Tribune. Sour milk is elixir. Secret of long life discovered by Professor Mechnikov.
And there was no turning back.
Drink sour milk. Live to be 180 years old.
This started a real mania, yogurt mania.
The London Telegraph, the Washington Post. People who wish to live to 100, breakfast off of yogurt exclusive.
That one lecture, Luba says, started a global yogurt trend that still exists today.
I think it's rare to trace the beginning of an industry to a single event. But in this case, I can say, that the yogurt industry started with that lecture.
Much later, we'd find out that yogurt was probably not the only reason people in that region of Bulgaria lived so long. It didn't really matter. Pharmacies started stocking yogurt. Doctors recommended it to patients. People used it as a disinfectant or preparation for surgery, even to treat some diseases. This stuff was all over the place.
There were ads, this cafe on one of the Parisian boulevards advertised Bulgarian curdled milk.
The yogurt craze kind of, grew and grew.
I saw pictures of Danone, which I think in the States is called Danone.
Yeah, Danone yogurt.
I mean, I don't even know how many different brands of yogurt we have today, but Danone is still there.
Even breakfast cereal pioneer John Harvey Kellogg reached out to Mechnikov. His face was everywhere.
They sold cups of yogurt and it's recommended by Professor Mechnikov and the medical profession. It it was totally got out of hand completely. There was all this hype and all this hoopla about it that he had no control over.
This wasn't exactly what Menshikov had wanted. Throughout his career, he was always arguing over how the media took his research and ran with it or twisted his words. He gave caveats to his work. He called his ideas theories.
He tried sort of to present the facts and to separate it from the hype, but it was just way too late. The good thing about yogurt was that it was harmless, because so many cures for aging were, terrible and dangerous and lethal, and yogurt was cheap, and it was safe, and easily available, so it was irresistible.
Menshikov was a scientist, but he was also a showman. Maybe yogurt wasn't a magic elixir, but science would still find the answers. Coming up, Menshikov returns to Russia to face one of his biggest critics. He's 63 years old, and he doesn't know it yet, but he's running out of time.
Hello world, I'm John Smith from Zurich in Switzerland, and you are listening to Throughline from NPR.
I'm Peter Sagal. NPR is very serious, mostly. It treats newsmakers with all due respect, almost all the time. It brings you the most important information about the issues that really matter, usually. And it never asks famous people about things they don't know anything about, except once in a while. Join us for the great exception. Listen to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, the news quiz from NPR.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, the host of Fresh Air. We bring you in-depth, long-form interviews with actors, directors, musicians, authors, journalists, and more. Listen to our Peabody Award-winning Fresh Air podcast from WHYY and NPR.
Part 3. Winter is coming.
It was at dawn that we reached the little railway station where a carriage had come to meet us.
On a cloudy May morning in 1909, Eli Menshikov, bow tie and green coat, and his wife Olga, white blouse, straw hat, descend from an overnight train.
We were excited by the sight of the Russian country. Cool meadows, forest, fields, all the simple landscapes that we had not seen for so long. And we were also greatly moved at the idea of meeting Tolstoy.
Menshikov has returned to Russia, where he was born, to visit the writer and philosopher Leo Tolstoy.
So he was looking to to solve the riddle of aging on all levels. He was looking for partners in this quest.
I had long wanted to get to know Tolstoy closer, learning in person what he really thought about universal issues that had fascinated me since my youth, especially the basis of morality, the meaning of life, and the inevitability of its end.
He admired so much Tolstoy's writing about the fear of death, which are really masterful.
A man can be master of nothing, while everything is death. And the man that he is not death possesses everything. Without suffering, a man would know not his limits.
So he thought that Tolstoy must know some secret that I don't.
This wasn't just some random meeting. Although the two had never met, their work had been in conversation for years. Tolstoy was critical of Menshnikov's work, and threw shade on science in general.
Scientists can tell useful knowledge from useless. They study such topics as the sexual organs of the amoeba only because this allows them to be like words.
And Menshnikov had written responses about Tolstoy, warning of the dangers of discarding science and embracing just spirituality.
In certain cases, his teaching had caused young researchers to drop science, burn their dissertations, and join communes to start a new life.
Now it's time to talk face to face. Menshnikov had minds. Now he needed hearts. At Tolstoy's estate, Mechnikov notes its simplicity. The furniture, functional but old. Any airs of luxury done away with. Tolstoy, 80, with a white flowing beard and white shirt, bounces down the stairs, full of energy.
The reporter called it a meeting of two monarchs, of universal literature and science.
The two spend the day together, debating science versus religion. Debating as they ride in a carriage. Debating after listening to Piano Works by Chopin. Debating over tea.
I highly value genuine science, one that is interested in man, his faith, and happiness.
Any idea that may be capable of uniting mankind in some religion or the future must be based on scientific principles.
For Mechnikov, science and reasoning always key. For Tolstoy, morals above all.
If we are going to submit everything to reasoning, we can arrive at the most absurd nonsense. I dare say, in that case, it will be possible to justify cannibalism.
Progress doesn't necessarily have to be based on people's love for one another.
When it came to Mechnikov's current work on aging,
the trouble is not that our life is too short, but that we live badly, contrary to our own conscience.
So the only thing on which they agreed was yogurt, because Tolstoy turned out loved yogurt. But other than that, it was pretty much a disaster, the meeting. Mechnikov very candidly, very honestly wrote about this himself afterwards.
Tolstoy noted that at the end of the day, our worldviews coincide, but with this difference. He takes a spiritual perspective, and I take a material one.
Mechnikov was much more spiritual than Tolstoy gave him credit for. He did try, I think, understand human psychology, and I think he thought that somehow together with Tolstoy he could get closer to cracking this riddle of, what really happens in the human psyche, in the human mind, how, we feel like that, how we feel when we age, why, this fear of death. And of course it just, totally crashed, the meeting didn't work at all.
And Tolstoy and Mechnikov's dispute of science versus religion fit into this larger European debate at the time over how to view and improve life.
At the turn of the 20th century, this was a very dominant dichotomy between pessimism and optimism. Sort of your belief, about the world. Is the world getting better?
For Tolstoy, the answer was no. So morality, love, faith, the here and now was the most important. But Mechnikov, an optimist, saw things differently. In headlines, the New York Times had crowned him of optimism. But of course, he continued to age.
In some of the Russian newspapers, he was bragging about how good he felt. He was saying that this is working. Look, I'm eating yogurt 3 times a day. I believe, it's doing me a lot of good. And look how vigorous I am.
Mechnikov's outwardly positive, science will save us all outlook was getting harder to maintain. In 1914, as his research continued, the headlines made a dark world impossible to ignore.
Assassin's bullet strikes down Archduke Ferdinand of Austria. Germany declares war on Russia. England declares war on Germany. 25,000 dead and peace refused by France. War declared, all Europe in turmoil.
What really killed him was World War I. He was such a believer in rational thought and science. He thought that there will be no more wars, that the world had learned from that, and he was devastated when war broke out and all science stopped at the Pasteur Institute.
Over 100 people at the Pasteur Institute get recruited to the war effort.
His wife describes it like how overnight he turned into an old man.
He could not bear the idea, now a terrible reality, that his brilliant young lives should be sacrificed.
War, she wrote, became a dark, sinister background to his daily life. And even though he had tried to convince Tolstoy that science had the answers to everything, that now looked empty in the face of a world war. He'd always thought his purpose in life was to help people reach their deathest, right? To live longer and live healthier until they felt ready to go. The idea that humans would willfully create so much death crushed him.
The contrast between his aspiration and the cruel reality had been to him a blow, which his sensitive and suffering heart was not fit to bear.
In 1916, so this was already more than a year after the war started, his health began to deteriorate and he developed heart disease, heart failure. In terms of the fear of death, he kept coming back to this. And he kept saying that I have conquered my fear of death, I have conquered it. And the truth is that you end up feeling the exact opposite, because had it been true, I don't think he would have had the need to repeat it so many times. So it was obviously something that he was still struggling with, I think, till the end of his life.
Let all those who expected me to live 100 years or longer forgive my premature death.
So he died from a heart attack. And the moments before he died, he asked his assistant to carefully look into his intestines and see what's there once he was gone.
He died in 1916 at 71, not even halfway to the 150 that he thought people should live. Many people were all over the world were disappointed. There were headlines saying, what have we done? We believe, because even despite all the skepticism, I think people wanted to believe that maybe it's true. Maybe he has found a recipe, a cure.
I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to do. I will never be unique. De-aging is not inevitable anymore. Companies are betting big money on it.
If we can slow aging enough, then we will be happy.
If you're concerned about preventing or minimizing the signs of aging, then this video is for you.
These are the 9 anti-aging foods you'll want to make sure you're
slow down
every
the aging process.
We should all be so lucky to age and grow old and get to experience this part of life. When you try and imagine it when you're younger, you think you may not want to be there because you get these images in your head of being bent over, using these walkers, and you don't want that to happen to you. But once you get out here, you look around and you go, hey, nothing's different. I'm just older.
This is Jay Olshansky, professor of public health at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He's one of the people today following in Eli Metchnikoff's footsteps.
Been working in the field of aging for almost 40 years.
Trying to figure out why people live as long as we do, and how to make that last even longer. In the year 2000, a few years after Eli Metchnikoff would have turned 150, Jay made a bet.
Basically, the bet was all about whether or not anyone alive in the year 2000 would be alive in the year 2150.
Could science keep someone alive until they're 150 years old.
My good friend thought that it was possible, and I said, no, it's not possible. The process of living itself leads to the degradation, the continuous degradation that ultimately leads to the demise of mind or body. And we have components of the body that don't replicate.
Muscle fibers, brain neurons, parts of our bodies that power on life and degrade as you age.
Those are our Achilles heels. So we can't get these bodies to last that long unless we turn the engine of life off. And when you turn the engine of life off, you're dead.
But Jay believes in the promise of science. It's taken us so far already. People live much longer than they did in Mechnikov's day. Jay thinks science will take us even farther, so that we can live healthier, longer.
Do I know which one of these interventions is going to succeed? No, I don't know. All we need is one that does.
The human desire to beat aging began way before Mechnikov, and will likely last way after Jay.
Nobody likes to die. So we want to extend the lifespan as much as possible and health span as much as possible, kind of just how Mechnikov envisioned. And with that goal, we keep searching.
Winter will come for me. It will come for all of us. The question is when, and what can we do to do what's the most important thing in my view, which is to enjoy life while we're here. We only get to go through this journey once, you know, for humans it's about 29 to 30,000 days. That's all we get. It, you know, varies, but that's it. 29 to 30,000 days. That's it.
Though in some ways, some of us get more than that. Eli Mechnikov wasn't able to beat aging, but he's still with us. In fridges, and on breakfast tables, everywhere.
That's it for this week's show. I'm Randa Abdel Fattah.
I'm Ramtin Arabli, and you've been listening to Throughline from NPR.
This episode was produced by me.
And me. And
Lawrence Wu.
Julie Kay. Anya Steinberg. Casey Weiner.
Christina Kim.
Devin Katayama. Peter Balanon Rosen. Thomas Liu.
Irene Noguchi.
Thanks to Leslie Kossa, Susan Evans, Sam Evans, Carol Hacker, Stefan Hubanov, and Anandita Valero. Also thanks to Sasha Soyeva, Zahar Kinzersky, Artem Kuznetsov, Peter Balanon Rosen, Anya Steinberg, Thomas Liu, and Laurent Lasavrier for their voiceover work.
Fact-checking for this episode was done by Kevin Vogel.
This episode was mixed by Maggie Itzar. Thanks to Johanna Sturkey, Eve Chapin, Colin Campbell, and Anya Grunman.
Music was composed by Ramtin and his band Drop Electric, which includes Anya Mizani,
Naveed Marvi, Sho Fujiwara.
And finally, if you have an idea or like something you heard on the show, please write us at throughline@npr.org.
Thanks for listening.
Think of all the things you can do in 10 minutes or less. Scroll through social media, check your bank balance, make a sandwich, or learn about the surprising economics behind all these things. The Indicator from Planet Money is a quick hit of insight into the economics of business, work, and everyday life. Every weekday in less than 10 minutes. Listen now to the Indicator podcast from NPR.
Up First achieves the rare 1-2 punches of being short and thorough, national and international, fact-based and personable. Every morning we take the 3 biggest stories of the day and explain why they matter. And we do it all in less than 15 minutes. So you can start your day a little more in the know than when you went to sleep. Listen now to the Up First podcast from NPR. The world of podcasts can feel overwhelming. We'll let you in on the easiest way to find your next favorite show. Head to npr.org/podcast. From politics to pop culture to music and everything in between, you'll find a selection of shows that'll make you a super fan in no time.
Welcome to another exciting edition of Are You Garbage? The show where you find out if your favorite comedians are classy individuals or absolute trash. Now, here are your hosts, Kevin Ryan and H. Foley.
Hey, everybody out there, and welcome back to everybody's favorite podcast. This is Are You Garbage? It's that little show we sit down with your favorite comedians, and we find out if they grew up to be classy, or if they're just a big old piece of trash. I'm your host, H. Foley, coming at you on a beautiful day. We're out back here at Tootie's in a new edition. She's upstairs sleeping one off.
Okay.
In the bathtub.
All right, good for her.
Each his own. My co-host is coming at you from right next to me. He is the CEO of Are You Garbage? He is an international businessman with international taste. Give it up for KJ, Kevin J. Drive.
I like that one, baby. What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in.
Likes the European broads.
That ain't lying. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. Full video available on YouTube. As you know, those numbers are fucking baby. And obviously the greatest website of all time, www.patreon.com/RUGarbage, baby. Sign up over there. There's about 13,000 people signed up already. Check it out, gang.
And having a nice quick shout out to our producer extraordinaire, the old magic man. Makes us all look good, works the ones, the twos, the threes and the fours. He crosses the T's and he dots the I's. Give it up for T-Bone McScruffins, Toby McMullen, everybody.
What up, boys?
Hey,
What up,
pal?
T-Bone? I'm stoked. I'm so excited to meet this guy. Talk about a guy who looks like he'd be right at home sliding down underneath a car.
Carburetor's blown.
Have that ready in about 2 weeks. Gang, the long hair ain't lying because we couldn't be more excited to have our incredibly, and I mean incredibly special guest here with us today for the first time. He is a very funny, very successful stand-up comedian, actor, and podcaster. And you might have seen him in, but not limited to. You got Laughs, you got Jimmy Kimmel Live, you have Comedy Central, Lights Out with David Spade, Stand Up Nashville, The Tonight Show, The Stand-Ups. You can hear him regularly on the Nate Land podcast. He has his own unbelievable podcast. We're having a good time. And he's got a brand new Netflix special out right now in the top 10. Working Man. Give it up for Dusty Slay, everybody. Let's go. There he is. The kid's in town.
Hey, thank you. We're having a good time. I appreciate you guys. What a great intro. You know, I've only listened to the podcast. I've never watched you. It's really fun to watch you guys.
We get into it, baby.
Yeah, that was fun.
The rest is downhill, boys. The first 90 seconds, we're swinging for the fences, baby.
Yeah, you guys are like so good. Like it's a real professional thing, and it feels good.
Thank you, buddy. We're excited to have you. Give us the origin story of Dusty Slay. Give us the backstory.
I would like to say you are one of the most requested guests we've had in a long time. So I know there's a lot of dirt under the fingernails.
It's not for your pedigree.
Well, I don't know what it says about me that people are like, you gotta have this guy on the Are You Garbage podcast.
You want to see trash.
Yeah.
You guys haven't seen shit yet. Get Dusty up there.
Well, okay. Well, this is great. You know, everybody loves to talk about themselves. That's what's great about this job that I have, where I just do things and they go, "Tell me about yourself," and I'm like, I love this.
Yeah.
This is like a date where you like get to do what you want to do.
Sure. You don't care about what they did for a living, where they went to school.
Yeah. Just bowling.
Fun, I love that. Well, I grew up in Alabama.
Okay.
My parents got divorced when I was 2.
Okay.
And, my dad says 3 sometimes.
You really got to squeeze that extra year out of you.
He hung in there.
I wrote 2 jokes. I put a joke on each album about how my parents got divorced when I was 2, and then my dad was like, you got divorced when you were 3. And I'm like, well, all right,
we're splitting hairs here. Yeah.
I don't
Go
know
back and reshoot, Pop.
I don't know why you're. That's what my dad does. My dad's a real nitpicky guy. He wants to get at you. You go, like I was at home at his house this over Christmas, and we were ordering Subway. And I don't really eat Subway anymore, but my dad loves it.
Okay.
They know him down at the Subway.
That's all the time we have today, folks.
And
big Christmas dinner, huh?
And I'm not eating it in a long time. And they were like, "What kind of bread do you want to get?" And I was like, I remember there was like a Parmesan oregano.
Yeah, there was.
And I was like, I'll have that. My dad goes, "Why can't you just eat regular bread?"